My husband steals $250,000 from me, then kicks me out. But wait till you hear the shocking twist. Did you know that nearly 30% of married couples have experienced some form of financial betrayal? Think about that for a second. Now, imagine this. One day, you find out that your partner, the person you trust the most, has taken $250,000 behind your back. Crazy, right? But here's the kicker. It's exactly what happened to me. My world turned upside down in a matter of moments. My husband not only drained our savings, he kicked me out of our home. And that's just the start of this roller coaster. Today, I'm sharing my story, not just a tale of theft, but a betrayal that goes beyond money. There's a shocking twist that you won't believe, and I promise it'll leave you questioning everything. So stay with me, because this story, it's about to get wild. Introduction. So, let me dive right in, because this story still feels surreal to me. Imagine being in a relationship where you trust someone with everything, your heart, your future, your finances. And then, one day, you find out it was all a lie. That's where I found myself. My husband didn't just betray me emotionally. He took $250,000 from me, and, as if that wasn't enough, he kicked me out of our home. It's hard to even put into words the depth of betrayal I felt in that moment. It wasn't just about the money, though, of course. Losing that kind of money in an instant is devastating. It was about trust. The foundation of our relationship had crumbled, and I was left wondering, how did I not see this coming? Let me paint you a picture of what my life looked like before this all went down. From the outside, everything seemed picture perfect. We had a cozy little home, a dog that we adored, and plans for a future filled with love and stability. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. I thought we were building a life together, one where we had each other's backs. But looking back now, there were so many red flags I chose to ignore. He started acting differently. First, it was small things, being secretive about our finances and avoiding conversations about money. Whenever I brought up the topic of budgeting or saving for the future, he would brush it off, saying, "Don't worry, I've got it under control." At the time, I thought he was just stressed about work. After all, he was the main breadwinner, and I wanted to trust him. But here's the truth. I didn't want to believe that the man I loved could do something so deceitful. It's strange, isn't it? We often ignore what's right in front of us because the truth is too painful to face. Deep down, I think I knew something was wrong. There were nights when I couldn't sleep, a nagging feeling in my gut telling me to take a closer look at our finances. But I pushed it aside. That nagging feeling finally caught up with me one fateful evening. I remember it vividly. I was sitting at our kitchen table, going through our bank statements, trying to figure out why we were always coming up short. I expected to find maybe a few unnecessary expenses here and there. What I didn't expect was to find thousands of dollars missing, not just once, but over and over again. I felt my heart sink as I scrolled through the transactions. There it was, plain as day. He had been siphoning money from our joint accounts, little by little, until the total added up to $250,000. Can you even imagine the shock? My first instinct was to think there must have been some mistake, but the truth was staring me right in the face. When I confronted him, I expected guilt, remorse, anything that showed he understood the gravity of what he'd done. Instead, he just sat there, stone-faced, and said, "It's my money now," as if that made everything okay. That's when I realized that the person I thought I knew, the man I had trusted with everything, was someone else entirely. It wasn't just the money. It was the coldness in his eyes, the way he acted as if I was the one overreacting. He didn't even try to justify his actions. Instead, he told me to leave. Just like that, I was out. No money, no home, no explanation. My life had been turned upside down in the span of one conversation. I remember standing outside our house, clutching my things, feeling completely lost. Everything I had known, everything I had worked for, was gone. It wasn't just the financial ruin. It was the emotional devastation that came with it. How do you move on from something like that? How do you rebuild when the person you thought would be your partner for life turns out to be the one who destroyed everything? But let me tell you, this story doesn't end there. If you think this is just a tale of theft and betrayal, you're wrong. There's a twist, a shocking revelation that changed everything, and I'm about to take you on that journey with me. So, stay with me, because what comes next is something I never saw coming. Action. Now, let's get into the details because this is where everything started to unravel. On the surface, things were fine, or at least, I thought they were. We had the life that most people would look at and say, they got it all together. A cozy home, a dog we adored, plans for the future. Those picture-perfect moments you see on social media. But what you see and what's real can be two very different things. Looking back now, I realize the signs were there all along, but I was blind to them, or maybe I just didn't want to see them. It started small. My husband began acting secretive, especially when it came to money. He stopped showing me our bank statements, made excuses when I'd ask about going over the budget, and brushed off any conversations about our financial plans. I thought it was stress. He had a demanding job, and I didn't want to add to his burden by prying. But now, I know I was making excuses for him. I remember this one night, probably about a month before everything came crashing down. We were sitting on the couch, watching TV, and I casually mentioned something about our savings. I wanted to start planning for a trip we've been talking about, and I thought, hey, let's check where we stand financially. He got tense. Not in a big way, but I noticed. He quickly changed the subject, saying something like, we'll deal with that later. I didn't push him. I told myself it was just bad timing, that maybe he was stressed from work, and the last thing he wanted to think about was money. But looking back, I should have trusted my gut. That was one of many moments that should have been a wake-up call for me. But when you love someone, you don't want to believe they could ever hurt you like that. Then came the day that changed everything. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sorting through our mail, when something caught my eye. A letter from our bank. Nothing unusual, except it was addressed to my husband, and I noticed he'd been hiding these letters lately. Without thinking, I opened it, and there it was. A notice about our account balance being dangerously low. I felt my stomach drop. This couldn't be right. We had savings. We were careful. I logged into our joint account and started scrolling through the transactions, my heart pounding harder with each click. And there it was, thousands of dollars gone. Not in one big withdrawal, but little by little over time. He had been draining our account behind my back. My hands were shaking as I confronted him later that night. I didn't know what to expect. An apology, a confession, something. But what I got? Cold. Emotionless. He didn't even deny it. He just sat there and told me, it's my money too. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. This wasn't just about money, it was about trust. The person I had built my life with, the person I trusted more than anyone, had been lying to me for months. But it didn't stop there. As if the financial betrayal wasn't enough, he looked at me, completely calm, and said, I think you should leave. Just like that. No explanation, no discussion. Just get out. I remember standing there frozen, trying to process what was happening. I had just discovered that my husband had stolen from me, and now he was kicking me out of the home we had built together. I packed my bags in a daze. I couldn't believe this was real life. I had nowhere to go. No savings, no plan, nothing. I left with what I could carry, feeling utterly lost. Everything I had worked for, everything I thought was secure, had crumbled in an instant. It was rock bottom. In the days that followed, I stayed with a friend, trying to make sense of it all. I kept replaying the moment in my head, wondering how I could have missed the signs. How could someone who was supposed to love me, who promised to take care of me, do something like this? The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was personal, emotional, and it cut deeper than I ever thought possible. I remember sitting in my friend's living room, staring at my phone, unsure of what to do next. Should I go to the police? Should I confront him again? I felt powerless. And the worst part? I still loved him. How do you reconcile those feelings? How do you move forward when the person who destroyed your life is also the person you're still in love with? But the story doesn't end there. As much as I wanted to curl up in a ball and pretend this wasn't happening, I knew I had to face it head on. And what I discovered next, well, that's when things took a turn I never saw coming. Climax. Here's the thing. I thought the worst part was over. I thought losing the money, losing my home, and being kicked out was the end of the story. But then something happened that completely flipped my world upside down again. I wasn't prepared for what came next. About a week after I left, I got a call from my husband. I didn't know if I should pick up, but part of me needed answers. I needed to know why he had done this, why he had thrown everything away. I braced myself for another cold and motionless conversation. But what I heard on the other end, it wasn't what I expected. He told me he had been trying to reach me for days, that he wanted to explain himself. I didn't know if I could handle hearing his excuses, but I agreed to meet him. I thought maybe he'd finally show some remorse, some guilt for what he had done. But what he told me, I didn't see it coming at all. We sat down, and he looked me straight in the eye. He wasn't angry or defensive. He was calm, almost too calm. And then he dropped the bombshell. He hadn't taken the money just for himself. No, he had taken it to invest, not in some shady scam or reckless spending, but in a startup, a tech company he believed was going to explode in value. I sat there in disbelief as he explained his plan. He said he had found this business opportunity months ago and was convinced it was a sure thing. He told me that he had wanted to surprise me with the news once the company made it big, that he thought he could take our savings, invest it, and then double, maybe even triple the money. I was furious. How could he think that taking all of our money, our life savings, and gambling it away without telling me was okay? I couldn't wrap my head around it. He kept saying, I did it for us. I wanted to give us a better future. But all I could think was, how could he betray me like that and think it was for our own good? At that moment, I was torn between wanting to scream at him and feeling this tiny flicker of hope deep down. Part of me was still in shock, but another part of me thought, what if he's right? What if this investment actually works out? Could this nightmare turn into something good? I hated myself for even thinking that way, but I couldn't help it. He went on to tell me that he still believed the investment would pay off. He wanted to fix things, to work together, and rebuild our life. He looked at me, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a glimpse of the man I fell in love with. He wasn't the cold, distant person I had confronted earlier. He was hopeful, almost desperate, to make things right. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. I mean, how do you come back from this? Even if the money was returned, even if the investment worked out, what about the trust? Could I ever trust him again? Or was this just another one of his plans, something that would end up hurting me even more? In that moment, I realized something important. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the lies, the secrets, and the betrayal. I didn't need the money back. What I needed was the truth, the honesty that had been missing for so long. As he kept talking about the investment, about how it was going to change our lives, I felt this strange mix of emotions. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to hope that somehow things could go back to the way they were. But deep down, I knew they couldn't. What he had done wasn't something we could just fix with a successful investment or a financial windfall. He had broken something much deeper than our bank account. He had broken us. I told him I needed time to think, that I couldn't make any decisions right then. He nodded, and for the first time, he seemed to understand that money wasn't going to fix everything. He looked sad, almost defeated as I walked away from that conversation. I left feeling more confused than ever. Part of me wanted to give him a chance, to see if this investment really would turn things around. But the other part of me knew that no amount of money could undo the damage that had been done. Trust doesn't work that way. This was the moment I realized I was standing at a crossroads. My husband wanted to make things right, but could I ever really trust him again? Could I rebuild a life with someone who had taken everything from me, both financially and emotionally? I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew one thing for sure. My life would never be the same again. Falling action. After that conversation with my husband, I was left with a heavy weight on my chest. Part of me hoped that he would fix things, that his investment might magically solve all the problems. But deep down, I knew better. It wasn't just the money that was gone. It was the trust, the security I had felt in our relationship, the sense of us. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about everything. I was still staying with a friend, but I barely slept. My mind kept replaying all the moments I had ignored, all the red flags I had brushed aside because I didn't want to believe that the person I loved could hurt me like this. I kept thinking, how did I not see it coming? It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the fact that he had no idea how much pain he had caused. He thought money could fix everything, that once the investment came through, it would be like nothing ever happened. But he didn't understand that what he had taken from me was more than financial. It was my sense of safety, my belief that I could rely on him, that we were partners. One night, as I lay awake, I realized something. This wasn't just about him anymore, it was about me. I had spent so long trying to make sense of his actions, trying to understand why he had done what he did, but I hadn't stopped to think about what I needed. And what I needed wasn't money, or even an explanation. I needed to take control of my life again. For the first time in weeks, I stopped worrying about what he would do next. I stopped waiting for him to fix things because I realized that wasn't going to happen. not in the way I needed it to. This was my life, and I had to figure out how to move forward with or without him. So I started by taking small steps. I opened my own bank account, something I should have done a long time ago. It felt like such a simple thing, but for me, it was a big moment. It was a way of taking back some control, of starting to rebuild my life on my own terms. I also started looking for a new place to live, somewhere I could call mine, a place where I could feel safe again. But more than that, I began to focus on myself, what I wanted, what I needed, and what kind of life I wanted to create going forward. I realized that I had been putting so much of my energy into making our relationship work, into building a future with him, that I had lost sight of who I was. Now, I had a chance to rediscover that. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I couldn't go back to the way things were. Even if the investment did pay off, even if he somehow managed to return all the money, the damage was already done. You can't unrake trust. Once it's gone, it's gone. And without trust, what's left? It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew I couldn't stay with him. As much as I wanted to believe that we could work through this, that he could change, I couldn't ignore what he had done. He had taken something from me that I could never get back, not just the money, but my peace of mind, my faith in him. And I wasn't willing to live in a relationship where I was always wondering if he'd betray me again. When I told him my decision, it was one of the hardest conversations I'd ever had. He was upset, of course. He kept saying that things would get better, that we could rebuild, that the investment would pay off and we could start fresh. But by then, I had made up my mind. I told him that money wasn't the issue anymore, it was trust. And once that's gone, no amount of money can bring it back. He didn't understand, and maybe he never will. To him, it was just a mistake, something that could be fixed. But to me, it was a sign that our relationship wasn't what I thought it was. I couldn't go back to pretending everything was okay, because it wasn't. Walking away was hard. I'm not going to lie, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But it was also the moment I started to feel like myself again. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't living in the shadow of his decisions. I was making my own choices, and that gave me a sense of strength I hadn't felt in years. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild my life. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I felt completely lost. But I started to focus on the things that mattered to me, the things that made me feel whole. I reconnected with friends, threw myself into work, and slowly, I started to feel like I was finding my way again. Looking back, I realized that this experience, as painful as it was, taught me something important. It taught me to trust myself. I had spent so long doubting my instincts, ignoring the signs, and putting someone else's needs before my own. But now, I knew that I had the strength to move forward, to create a life for myself, even when things fell apart. And while the wound from his betrayal will always be there, I've learned to live with it, to let it be part of my story without letting it define me. Resolution. As I sit here now, looking back at everything that's happened, I realize just how much my life has changed. What started as the most painful experience I've ever been through has slowly turned into something that I can now see as a turning point in my life. It's strange, isn't it? How something that breaks you in the moment can actually make you stronger in the end. When my husband took that money, he wasn't just taking our savings, he was taking away my sense of security, my trust in him, and the future I thought we were building together. And when he kicked me out, it felt like he had taken away everything I knew. At the time, I thought I'd never recover from that. But here's the thing, I did. In fact, I'm still recovering, and maybe I always will be in some way, but I'm stronger now. I've learned so much about myself through all of this. I've learned that I'm capable of more than I ever thought. I've learned that no matter how much someone might hurt you, you still have the power to decide what happens next. You don't have to stay broken. The biggest lesson I've taken away from this whole experience is that trust is everything. Without trust, there's nothing to hold on to. No matter how much money is involved, no matter what someone promises you, if you can't trust them, it's impossible to build a future together. And I'm not just talking about trust with others. I'm talking about trusting yourself. For a long time, I doubted myself. I ignored the red flags because I didn't want to believe what was happening. I thought I could fix everything, that if I just loved him enough or gave him enough time, things would get better. But sometimes, love isn't enough. Sometimes, you have to trust your gut and make the hard decision to walk away, even when it hurts. Walking away from my husband wasn't just about leaving him. It was about choosing myself for the first time in a long time. It was about realizing that I deserved more than secrets and lies. I deserved honesty, respect, and a partner who would stand beside me, not someone who would betray me behind my back. As I moved on from that part of my life, I started to rebuild, not just financially, but emotionally. I began to trust myself again. I started small, taking control of my finances, finding a place to live, and focusing on the things that made me feel grounded. But more than that, I started to focus on the things that brought me joy, the things I had neglected while I was caught up in trying to make our relationship work. It wasn't easy. There were days when I felt like I had lost everything, and there were nights when the loneliness felt overwhelming. But each day, I reminded myself that I was moving forward, even if the steps were small. And with each small step, I started to feel more like myself again. One of the hardest things I've had to come to terms with is that sometimes the people we love the most can hurt us in ways we never imagined. But that doesn't mean we have to stay in that pain. We have the power to decide how much space that pain takes up in our lives. And for me, I decided that I wasn't going to let this betrayal define me. Instead, I let it teach me. I let it show me what I truly value in a relationship: honesty, openness, and mutual respect. I let it push me to grow into someone who is stronger, more independent, and more confident in what I deserve. And now, I'm in a better place. I'm not saying that everything's perfect, far from it. But I've started to rebuild my life on my own terms, and that feels more valuable than anything money could buy. I've learned to be cautious, to trust my instincts, and to never let anyone take control of my life again. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this: you are stronger than you think. When someone betrays your trust, it's easy to feel like your whole world is falling apart, and in some ways it is. But it's also an opportunity to rebuild, to create something new, something stronger, something that reflects who you truly are and what you truly deserve. This experience has shown me that life doesn't always go the way we plan. Sometimes, the people we trust the most will disappoint us, and sometimes things fall apart. But even when it feels like everything is crumbling around you, you still have the power to rebuild. You still have the power to decide what happens next. So, to sum it all up, my husband stole a massive amount of money, kicked me out of our home, and then tried to justify it with some grand plan about making us rich. But the real lesson here isn't about money. It's about trust, honesty, and learning to put yourself first. I've learned that you can't build a relationship on secrets, and you can't move forward if you're constantly looking back, hoping things will go back to the way they were. I'm not the same person I was before all of this happened. For that, I'm grateful. This experience changed me, but in the end, it made me stronger. I'm moving forward now, with a new sense of clarity and a better understanding of what I want and need in my life. And I know that no matter what happens next, I can handle it. Because here's the truth: I trust myself now. And that's something no one can ever take away from me. Call to action. So now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been through something like this? Or maybe you've had your own struggles with trust in a relationship. I'd love for you to share your stories or thoughts in the comments below. It's not easy to talk about betrayal or the hard moments in life, but sometimes sharing can help us heal, and you never know who might be going through something similar. Also, if you found this story helpful or if it resonated with you, please give this video a like and don't forget to subscribe for more. I talk about real-life stories, tough experiences, and the lessons we can learn from them. You're not alone in these challenges, and together, we can keep finding ways to move forward, no matter what life throws at us. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you for being here and sharing this space with me.